When Mona Ansari was 13 years old, her family was forcibly evicted by the police from their home. They ended up living on the streets. This traumatic experience of injustice has shaped Mona's life. From these humble beginnings, she is now Nepal's first female Muslim lawyer. Mona is currently a member of the National Human Rights Commission, the only woman among 5 men. The commission, which was set up in 2000, is enshrined in Nepal's constitution. It is an independent body that aims to uncover human rights abuses and confront the government on these issues. The case of Devi Sunuwar is just one of almost 5,000 from the time of civil war that has been taken up by the commission.
My daughter Mina was 14 years old. She was in the 9th grade. One day, soldiers came to our house. They wanted to question me, but I wasn't at home. So instead, they took my daughter to the army barracks.
When Mina's frantic mother went to speak to the army the next day, those responsible for her daughter's abduction denied any wrongdoing and refused to give her any information.
Devi Sunuwar approached to Human Rights Commission, and Human Rights Commission wrote a letter to the army and local security authority to asking the whereabouts her daughter. And then later on, NHRC found the graveyard of the Devi Sunuwar. And then our exhuman team found she was severely tortured and murdered during the interrogation of the army. So NHRC wrote a strong recommendation on this case to take action against the perpetrator and provide a reparation to the victim family.
Devi Sunuwar's daughter is one of around 13,000 victims of the civil war that engulfed Nepal between 1996 and 2006. During this time, atrocities were committed by both Maoist rebels and the Nepalese army. Hundreds of people are still missing. The National Human Rights Commission plays an important role in the fight for justice and has been able to identify a large number of victims by carrying out exhumations.
During
the Civil War, more than 3,300 people disappeared without a trace. So we carried out exhumations and were able to return some remains of these dead bodies to their family members. Of course, this doesn't bring the person back to life, but it's important for families that have been traumatized by disappeared loved ones. Unfortunately, the perpetrators of these crimes have still not been convicted. The same applies to the case of Devi Sunuwar. Her mother was granted compensation for her personal suffering by the court, but she continues to wait in vain for the perpetrators of her daughter's torture and murder, who have been identified, to be prosecuted.
If my daughter's case gets to court and the perpetrators are punished, my fight will give courage to other victims' families. We will carry on supporting you over and over again. Thank you. May justice prevail.
Devi found an unexpected source of consolation in another fateful blow that shook the country in 2015.
On the day of the earthquake, a young homeless woman gave birth to a baby girl in my house. The mother was poor and looked like she lived on the streets. She didn't want to keep the child and disappeared, leaving the baby with me. When I looked at the baby, I knew that she had my daughter's soul and that God had sent her to me. That's why I adopted her.
The earthquake in 2015 claimed some 9,000 lives and destroyed thousands of houses, public buildings and facilities. Many states and international organizations pledged support for the Nepali people, and the government set up a national authority responsible for reconstruction. But the National Human Rights Commission received reports about irregularities concerning the distribution of relief supplies and assistance for reconstruction. This makeshift camp in the middle of Kathmandu is home to around 1,000 people who are forced to leave their homes in the provinces because of the earthquake 2 years ago.
NHRC mission is to visit this Chuchepati camp, especially to monitor the situation of earthquake survivor. Many people are living on the same situation since 2015.
That is why Mona Ansari wants to ask the people living in the camp why they haven't received any assistance to rebuild their houses.
Relief supplies coming into the camp are not given out fairly. Some people get more money than we do. Other people were given money even though they have a house in the city that hasn't been damaged. And we, the real victims of the earthquake, don't get any help.
NHRC received some of the complaint by the victims of the earthquake because the relief is not reaching to the main people. They are not receiving money which is allocated by the government. We are going to prepare our report and then we will discuss with the government authorities. So I think this is a serious concern of the corruption and human rights.
In remote provinces, the human rights situation has become even more complex since the earthquake compared to other parts of the country. The main concerns are the forced relocation of villages, unclear land rights, injustices in connection with the caste system, and discrimination against women and sections of the indigenous population. That is why the National Human Rights Commission is focusing on these regions in particular. Here in Singai, an almost 8-hour arduous drive from the capital, the number of victims and level of damage caused by the earthquake are particularly high.
Most of the population who lived in a higher mountain, they lost, after earthquake, they lost their legal paper. So they cannot produce their legal document to the local authorities to get the post-earthquake identity card and reconstruction money.
Is that your house there? Yes, that's my house. My buffalo is still buried under the rubble. How many buffaloes did you have? Just this one. The roof fell in and killed him. I didn't get any money for him. But I hope you were given money to rebuild your house. We're building a new house over there, yes. But we only just got the money for it yesterday. Really? Is that true? Yes, only yesterday. Have you got a property card? We lost it in the earthquake. Then you definitely have to look for it. That's impossible. The earthquake happened 1.5 years ago. You must apply for a new property card.
In addition to its head office in Kathmandu, the National Human Rights Commission has 8 regional offices in different parts of the country.
Yes, my office also going to try.
To monitor compliance with human rights in areas that are difficult to access, the Commission has mandated local journalists, lawyers and other trusted persons to observe the human rights situation there and report to them. If the Commission identifies a human rights abuse, it first approaches the authorities in the district concerned.
I talked to a lot of people yesterday and came across many problems. Reconstruction in the villages has still not begun.
It's the farmers rebuilding these homes in addition to their normal work. That takes time.
labor promotion ko lagi
Have you thought about offering farmers courses about reconstruction?
promotion ko lagi kunai testo soch athwa kuनै रणनीति त्यस्तो बनाउनु भएको छ?
Yes, we're going to show them how to build walls and work with wood.
It has come to our attention that it takes a very long time before people receive the first installment of the reconstruction assistance from the state. It has taken up to 16 months.
Sometimes they don't have the right papers, or there are no clear lists of the injured parties.
The cooperation is not good.
You don't understand.
culture of human rights.
We always talk about a culture of human rights, but this is only possible if we respect the rules and the guidelines.
Rule of law लाई respect गर्नै पर्छ, otherwise हुँदैन.
If we don't, people won't be able to repair their houses, and the reconstruction of Nepal will take forever. That's for sure.
त्यो चाहिँ guarantee छ.
In 2015, violent clashes broke out in southern Nepal. The reason was the new constitution, which the southern provinces felt discriminated against them. During the demonstrations, Nepal's most important trading routes were blocked for months. This seriously affected the country's supplies and set back the economy considerably. The clashes were marked by the use of excessive force, both by the police and the protesters. The National Human Rights Commission reported that 48 civilians and 7 police officers were killed. Representatives of the commission were already on the ground during the protests, monitoring the situation and interviewing those involved. Benita Kalwa's husband was hit by a bullet fired by a police officer during a demonstration and fatally wounded.
As I was driving to the hospital, I didn't know that my husband was dead. I thought he had only been seriously injured. But then, when I saw him, with his face covered by a cloth, I fainted. My youngest son just turned 1. How am I going to be able to provide for my 2 children and mother-in-law?
Members of the National Human Rights Commission record cases and support the victims' families by communicating with the authorities and courts. Thanks in part to the activities of the Commission, Benita Kalwa and her 2 children received $10,000 in compensation. Since the death of her husband, Benita Kalwa runs the small restaurant alone. The future still looks bleak despite the compensation, but her financial situation is not what Benita focuses on.
The people who shot my husband must be punished. Since that day, my life has been full of sorrow. Although I've been given financial compensation by the government, it's not enough. I insist that the authorities arrest and punish the perpetrators.
Being both a woman and a representative of Nepal's Muslim minority, Mona Ansari is a great hope for many, and consequently subject to high expectations.
In my work, I face many difficulties and unbearable situations when I see the people are struggling for access to justice due to poverty. It gives me strength to fight for them and to better the human rights situation in Nepal.
One of the central elements of the Commission's work is recording evidence.
During the Bhattarai conflict, NHRC worked together with the civil society and the journalists and then advocates at local level, collecting the information and the fact sheet about the killing and excessive use of force.
The squad leader here is giving 2 police officers the order to shoot. And this protester, Shatrughan Patel, is hit and falls to the ground.
How far apart are they?
About 100 meters. Even if the demonstrators had been throwing stones, they would not have reached the police. But the crowds weren't even being violent.
Our
work to defend human rights is very dangerous because our investigations are leveled at the state. But thanks to the cooperation with the National Human Rights Commission, we feel reasonably safe and protected. In the absence of better alternatives, the Commission also relies on reports coming from the protest movement. But Mona Ansari is aware that the credibility of these information providers always needs to be scrutinized.
Sometimes it's critical. We cannot trust all of them, but it's important to take a fact from them and then we can filter ourselves. This is a part of our investigation.
The goal of the National Human Rights Commission is to defend and strengthen human rights in the country. This includes bringing perpetrators of human rights abuses to justice. The Commission also exerts pressure on the government to improve respect for human rights and to strengthen the protection of these rights. This is one of the ways in which Mona Ansari, in her capacity as Speaker of the National Human Rights Commission, makes use of her presence at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, for example.
Recently, 55 people, including security personnel, were killed during the political protests in Bhattarai due to dissatisfaction with a new constitution. Finding of the NHRC shows that killings and injury due to the excessive use of force. Thus, I would like to re-emphasize to accept a recommendation for proper investigation and prosecution on excessive use of force. That can only ensure the victim justice.
Mona's statement before the Human Rights Council did not go unnoticed.
After that, we are called by the head of the state, especially by the Prime Minister, on that meeting, why we made this kind of a critical statement in the international forum.
Yeah, Mona Ansari was criticized not only by certain government agencies, but we had very frank talk with the Prime Minister also. I very frankly talked to Prime Minister that Human Rights Commission is not the office of the Prime Ministers. It is an independent, powerful, constitutional organization. But still, government is not happy by our report sometimes. But we are not bothered whether government is happy or not. Whatever we see, we publish it.
The government's skeptical position is probably the main reason why not even a single case brought to its attention by the National Human Rights Commission to date has led to a conviction. In spite of this, the Commission has set a few things in motion during its 15-year existence.
Okay, the National Human Rights Commission has investigated on near about 5,000 cases, and there were altogether 2,000 victims has been recommended for compensation or justice. And the Commission has also asked the Nepal government to make provision for human rights education in the curriculum in school level. The government has immediately response on it. And the Commission has also provided human rights training to the human rights defenders to develop their capacity in different parts of the country.
Respect for human rights is essential for the development of a society. That is why Switzerland provides financial assistance to the Nepalese National Human Rights Commission.
So die Förderung der Menschenrechte, die Anerkennung von individuellen Rechten.
The promotion of human rights and recognition of individual rights is integral to the political process that a new Nepal is being built upon. For us, it's an essential component of the commitment to peace and progress here. The country cannot advance without asserting individual rights that are universally recognized.
Individuelle Rechte kommt das Land nicht weiter.